Well, hello, good evening, welcome, and thanks for joining us here again, back in AOPA's Pilot Information Center webinars, Livestream Webinar series. This will be the second one we've done in this short series, and I think the third that we've put out this year so far. Hope you're enjoying being able to spend some time with us on this new and exciting technology. I'm Ferdy Mack, here with AOPA's Pilot Information Center in Frederick, Maryland. And joining me this evening is Eric Rush. Eric is AOPA's Director of Project Management and is a part of the AOPA Flight Planning Products team. Thanks for joining us, Eric.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to be here with you, and looking forward to being again there with you coming up. I think we'll be both in Lakeland in just a short
time. Sun and Fun just around the corner, and Ferdy and I will both be there for I don't know how many years in a row this is, but we're looking forward to it. It's always a great time, and some of the stuff you're going to be seeing here tonight you'll be able to check out firsthand at the AOPA tent. We'll have kiosk computers, and what we're going to show you here tonight you can actually interact with,
which will be great.
Yep.
And on that note, so what we'll be covering this evening is AOPA's Flight Planner Enhancements. Now we're not going to start from square one and show you from the start how you can engage with our wonderful online flight planner. Instead, what we're going to cover tonight is some of the new as well as the upcoming, stress on upcoming, not yet available for release, but we're going to wow you tonight with some of these new features that Eric and his team have been working on, and it's really some good stuff. So Eric, where are we going to start tonight?
Great. So one of the things, as Ferdy said, we're not going to be necessarily looking at every least little feature. We only have a limited amount of time, and the AOPA Flight Planner is a very fully featured product. But we're going to look at some of the new things that we're working on, and we don't typically do this with our webinars that we've done in the past. This is a little bit new, and I know there's going to be people who are joining us late and didn't get this little kind of public service announcement, but there's going to be two features that we are very close to releasing, one more closer than the other, and we'll talk about that. But I do want to stress that these are not currently available in the product, but we do want to show them just because we're very close to releasing one of them, and the other one happens to be the #1 top requested member feature that we get. So we get probably 2 calls a week. I know in the PIC you guys get a bunch of calls about, hey, I wish the AOPA Flight Planner could do this. I know I see at least 2 a week about this. So we listen to our members, we work on it, and we have it, so we wanted to go ahead and show you, take this opportunity to show you our progress on that, and then we'll take a look at some of the other popular features. So real quickly here, a couple of the things that we're going to be going over. The one thing we've been working on is the integration with Leidos Flight Service. You may remember them as Lockheed Martin Flight Service or 1-800 Weather Brief. In the past, we've always had just an integration with CSRA Duots, which our flight planner is currently integrated with. But now we have integrated with Leidos. It's the same company as Lockheed Martin Flight Service, same staff, same people, same building, same services. It's just a different name for who they are now. So we are building what we're calling the next gen graphical briefing and filing. So that you're going to have 2 options now in the flight planner. You'll be able to either get your briefs and file through CSRA, or you're going to be able to now go through Leidos. And this is the one that's a little bit closer. And you can see the little red asterisk there on the screen. And just to reiterate, there's 2 features. That is something that is coming soon. We do not have it in the public or in the production version of the product. We're going to look at route line fuel warnings. And the reason I put this in here sort of second is it's a good segue into the intermediate stop feature. And this is the #1 user requested or member requested feature we have in the flight planner. There are no other flight planning tools that I'm aware of that have this feature. And after we've started working on it, I sort of know why. There's nobody else has attempted to do this. It sounds very simple, but it is actually quite complex to do it. Then we're going to take a look at a couple of the very popular tools we released earlier in the year, Weather Along Route, actually later last year, Weather Along Route, Fuel Along Route, Airports Along Route. So you can see that we sort of have this theme going of a long route tools. So we focus more on your route for some of these tools. And then we'll wind it up with the EFB integrations, which has been another very popular member requested feature. Is they love using the AOPA Flight Planner on their nice big screen on their computer or their laptop at home or at work. But then we want to go to the cockpit, and it's only natural to say, let me plan it on my nice big 24-inch monitor, but then I want to be able to send that flight plan over to my EFB, whatever app. And we integrate with 6 different apps, and we'll show you a couple of those and how that works.
And before we go to the next slide, I just want to harp on in a positive way, that intermediate stop feature. So what does that really mean? You've explained it one way. Another way you might explain it is if someone sits down to plan a flight from, say, here in Maryland to Florida, most of your small piston GA airplanes are going to need a fuel stop.
Absolutely.
So you sit down the night before in the comfort of your own home on your big PC or Mac, and you've got a giant screen keyboard and all the bells and whistles, and you go to plan that route. You plug in Frederick to Lakeland, for example. You hit the button and it says, oh, you need 6.5 hours of fuel. First thing you think is, oh, that's no problem. I'll just, oh, wait a minute. I'll just have to put a stop in there somehow. And today, when asked, when our staff and your staff are asked, how do I implement that in the flight planner? The answer is simple, but it leaves something to be desired. That answer being, oh, it's easy. You simply have to plan 2 complete separate segments, route each one independently.
Yep.
It's possible, but it's not all tied together. It doesn't give you the complete pictures. And our members are going to be so thrilled when they get this.
And that's the way it works on any EFB app you're using too. I mean, if you are using an EFB app solely to plan your flights, most of the ones I'm aware of don't have this feature, so you're still planning 2 separate flights. But we're going to allow you to do it from a planning perspective. We kind of put our blinders on a little bit and look at pure flight planning, and this is where we're going to allow you to plan that, get your entire route set up, know where your fuel stop is. We'll show you how to pick it so it's an optimal stop based on amenities and fuel prices and everything else you want at an airport. We'll show you that with the airport filters. Once you get that route set up, you know where you're stopped, then you can send each one of those legs to your favorite EFB, and now you'll end up with 2 flights as you can use it in your EFB app. So it's sort of the full circle of flight planning.
Okay, great. Let's dive in a little deeper then.
Sure. So we're going to start off with the next gen briefing, and this is the one where is the integration with Leidos Flight Service. And it's not only briefing, it's filing. Now, one of the things that we know with the old version or with a textual based briefing, especially when you get into a long flight. And we're going to be looking at a flight tonight from Frederick, Maryland to Lakeland, Florida. It just seemed perfect to do that. I'm actually going to be flying down there this year. I pulled a lucky straw, and I'm going to be in the right seat in a beautiful Mooney Ovation 2. So we'll be flying down there, and we're going to be planning our flight using these tools for that whole route and where we're going to stop. So we're going to be using this tool to do that. But when we get a briefing, we know that there are people out there who are basically button clickers, and we have had people tell us this at the air shows, our fly-ins, and at the bigger shows like Oshkosh and Sun and Fun, that the only reason they get a briefing is for the
to check that box,
cover myself a little bit and tick that box, So they literally click the briefing box, but they don't go on and read the briefing, and that's scary. There's some great information in these briefings, and there's some really important information that we really need to be looking at. Part of that is, how do we make something that is a lot of information consumable and digestible? The whole saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we've tried to carry that into this tool and make it visual and graphical so that you can see where these NOTAMs are in relationship to your route line. You can see what the weather is going to be based on color coding. So we're really trying to make this a visual type tool. So this is the integration with Leidos, or 1-800-Weather Brief, maybe how you are aware of seeing that. It's graphically oriented, it's interactive, which means you can actually make this full screen and you can click on elements on the chart to focus in on certain sections. We have index sections on the side, so all the different sections of the briefing are enumerated on the side. You can click those. We also keep track of the ones you've read and the ones you have not read. So that's the unread section indicator icon. That's kind of a mouthful. There's also a critical NOTAM section. We'll talk about this a little bit more once we get into it. This does support full AOPA Flight Plan filing. We know that's just around the corner, that we're going to have to switch over to the AOPA Flight Plan format. And we have an AOPA equipment code calculator also built into the flight planner. That allows you to build the code that you need for AOPA. That's been a confusing subject. I'm sure you guys get a lot of calls in the PIC about, here's the equipment I have on my plane. How do I know what my code is? We've made that very simple in the flight planner, and you can actually build an aircraft profile and then just click on the different capabilities that your aircraft has, and we'll build that code for you.
And if you haven't approached that task yet, don't be surprised by how daunting it may seem. It's complicated, but the wizard-style interface that you and your team have put together really do make it a lot easier for a pilot to figure out what this complicated string is to identify what your aircraft has.
Right.
You only have to really do it once your unless you've changed anything in your aircraft. So you're going to take the hit once, go through this wizard. It's nice, it's easy.
Right.
That's the 90% of the solution. The other 10% of the solution, however, is you need to know what's in your airplane. So sometimes when people approach us and say, tell me what my surveillance string is or my equipment string is, if you can't answer all the questions about, do you know if your ADS-B out is 978 or 1090 megahertz, for example? You're going to need to know all the answers to those questions so that you can check all the boxes. But it is a wonderful tool, and it's going to save you a lot of time.
And just to expand on that just quickly, it's not necessarily what equipment you have in your plane, it's what capabilities that equipment has. For instance, the venerable Garmin 430 panel GPS that has become the kind of the standard almost GPS. The early 430s were not WAS capable, and the later 430s had WAS. That is two different codes. One allows you to fly a precision approach, and the other one wouldn't. So that is actually a different code. So it's not necessarily just the type of hardware; it's what the capabilities of that hardware are, and that's part of the confusing.
Great point. Great point.
So let's get in and let's take a look now. We're going to switch over and take a look, and like I said, we're going to build an actual flight. We're going to be going from Frederick, Maryland to Lakeland, and we're going to do a quick briefing on that and take a look at this new graphical style briefing. And again, keep in mind this is not currently available in the product. This is going to be the Leidos integration, but we will have this very shortly. If you're going to Sun and Fun, stop in and see us. I'm going to be there. Ferdy's going to be there. A couple other people from our dev team that work on these tools will be there. And you can sit down and play with this yourself and get a firsthand touch of it. We know from some past webinars we've done, we do have some new people perhaps that have not used our flight planning tools. And we have this tendency to kind of jump in and just start showing things from like level 3. So I'm going to sort of show you how to create a flight from scratch. It's very simple and it's not really going to add any time. But if you're brand new to the tools, you have not used the tools before, the first thing you need to do is create a pilot profile. It's a real quick interface, name, just your basic information, and then also set up an aircraft profile. And we provide certain common templates to help you do that, but you can also create one from scratch if your particular aircraft, if we don't have the POH for your aircraft, you'll create one from scratch. But again, it's a very simple form. It should be information you're already familiar with, and it only takes a couple minutes to set up a profile. So set up a pilot profile, an aircraft profile, then you're all set to use the flight planner. If we go to the route menu and click on new, you're going to get a very simple form to fill out. Basically, where are you starting? Where are you going? What type of aircraft are you using? What altitude do you want to fly? And for the routing, do you want to use direct or do you want to use low airways or high airways? And then your time and date of departure. That's all the information you need. And these departure and destination fields, they are kind of combo fields. So you can actually type in either the identifier for the airport or any part of the airport name or even the city that the airport is located in. So if all that I knew was Lakeland and I didn't know Lakeland was KLAL, I could type in Lakeland and it's going to show me all the matches for Lakeland, and then I can choose the one I want. So it's a search box and an ident box all rolled into one. So here's our basic flight, and we're going to click Plan Route. It's going to build a route based on that information I gave it, and it's going to show it basically in the shortest route. So if we pick low airways, it's going to use the shortest route that it can do. If you're filing IFR, this may not be what you're going to get, and we'll talk about that later, actually in another video of how we're going to do sort of that integration piece. But right now you can see that it built our flight. Over here it is 776 nautical miles at the bottom, and based on this aircraft performance, I think I used a Piper Archer here. It's 6 hours and 36 minutes, and that is based with the winds aloft calculation built into that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do a briefing. A couple different ways you could do it. You could go to route.
You forgot to blow your own horn about one of these things with this routing feature. We didn't talk about MEAs.
MEAs, yes, thank you. A common question we get, or a common kind of support ticket request we get all the time is, I tried to create a route using low airways and it gave me this very unusual route. It added 400 miles to an otherwise straight route, and it took me way out somewhere. It's just a really, really strange route. And at first glance, if that would happen, you would think that there's something wrong with the flight planner. What it's actually doing is it's respecting MEAs, or minimum en route altitude, for those airways. So every airway, if you're VFR, you should know this. IFR, certainly pilots will know what an MEA is, but that provides radio communication. It's the right altitude where you can be assured of radio communication and navigation signal, okay, along that airway. It also gives you at least, I believe it's 1,000 feet of obstacle or terrain clearance in that MEA. So our flight planner respects the MEA, and it's not going to put you onto an airway. If I come in here, and I did this at 8,000, but if I went in and did this at 4,000 feet, there is some terrain just in the West Virginia area. There's some mountainous terrain there that there is no MEA that is down at 4,000 feet. So it's going to take us in a sort of a circuitous route around all of that, and it's going to add a lot of time. So be careful with that, because I know there's other flight planning tools that we get compared to often that do not consider MEAs whatsoever. And people will say, well, I used product X and it gave me the perfect route and everything like that. 9 times out of 10, it's because that tool does not respect MEAs and does not consider them. It's just it'll take you through a mountain if you plan it correctly.
That's the expression we always use, and sooner or later, that pilot's going to be surprised by what they see, either outside the window or hopefully on their chart.
Right.
During their planning process.
Yes. So thank you for bringing it up. That is a very important piece to understand. So anyway, to get our briefing, if I go to the route menu, I could pick briefing and file plans. We have a menu item for that. To make that even simpler, at the bottom we have a brief and file button at the bottom of the route window, which is over on the left side. If I click brief, this will be a familiar interface to anybody who's used this. The one thing that's different is you see CSRA, but you also will now see, again, once we release this, you will see Leidos as an option. It pulls all of this information in from your flight plan. You can change any of this information here if you want to change your departure time or your altitude. We're going to go ahead and accept all of this, and we're going to hit submit request. This is now generating a live weather briefing based on this route and this departure time. Okay, so this can take a couple seconds to work. It just depends on how long your route is, how much information that the route briefing is trying to retrieve. Generally, it doesn't take more than about 15, maybe 30 seconds at the most for that to generate a briefing.
And of course, it's going out to the official sources, whichever
Absolutely.
The ones that you configure, either Leidos or
CSRA.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So this is an official briefing, even though there's no there's really nothing that says it's not an official briefing, because they got rid of that requirement that it had to be a quality provider, or whatever that acronym was back in the day.
QICP, I think.
Yes, QICP.
Something like that.
So as long as you're getting the information, it doesn't really care where you're getting the information from, as long as you have it from a reputable source. Okay. So now we see the integration here, and we see in the middle we have this nice chart. It's the exact same chart you're going to have in the flight planner. Over on the left, we have all of the different sections of the briefing. And you can see the little blue dot next to each one of those. It tells us up here that there are 46 unread sections. Every time we click on a section, you'll see that section gets deducted from the summary, and it'll tell us that, okay, you've read that section, and the icon next to that gets deducted as well. So here we're looking at a TFR. It shows us where the TFR is, and then you'll get all the information over on the right about that TFR. One important part is in this red banner up top. It says that this TFR is going to be active when your flight is going to be going through that area. So we calculate and determine, is this going to be effective? Sometimes we'll have different TFRs that will expire or will not start before your flight is scheduled to go through there. So we do that calculation. We let you know up here is if you are going to traverse through that area while it's active, that will be displayed. So you can see the active time, all the information about it. And in the interest of time, we're not going to look at every one of the sections in here, but we are going to jump through a couple of them that are pretty important. Another one, closed and unsafe NOTAMs. This is going to show us anything where we may have airport closures, runway closures, or anything like that. They have their own section. And you can see, ironically, here at our destination, there are 2 for closed runways. I can't imagine why Lakeland would be closing some runways this week.
You'd think they'd want a lot of people to be able to get in and out of there.
Yeah, geez, they're probably even going to land people on the taxiway, I'd imagine. So, so we can see here by clicking on this, it will pull all this information in, and then we even have filters. So if this was a big, long list, you could actually filter in or use these filters to narrow it down if you wanted to. So not only can you use filters, you can actually click on the chart objects themselves. They're interactive and allow you to click on them to navigate. We can see there's some air mets. So when you look at the air mets, you'll see a familiar shape that you maybe see with some other tools. So here we have air met Sierra. Okay, so look, this is an outlook. This actual air met starts 50 minutes after we are estimated to leave this area. So this is not going to be effective until we're outside of the area. So you can see it changed to a yellow, more of a cautionary thing instead of a warning, okay? But as you pick on it, if there was more than one, all you would have to do is hover your mouse over it. You don't have to click on it, and it would actually jump to that actual one. So air mets, sig mets, all of that would be in there. If you see any of these sections that are grayed out, that means there is no information in that section. So in a textual-based briefing, you would actually have to read through that to know. We'll go down just to look at a couple more here real quick, the current weather. So this is what the current weather is. Geez, I hope it looks like this when we're leaving on Sunday to go down. We're looking at green or VFR the entire route down there. And all that I have to do is put my mouse on any one of these dots, and it will then jump to the corresponding METAR associated with that particular airport.
That's actually very simple, but very helpful. It saves a lot of scrolling time.
Right. And you can see the proximity, again, you can see the proximity to those METARs of how close they are and where they are in proximity to your actual route, okay? Forecasts work very similarly, the same way. If I look at terminal area forecasts, again, we're going to see what that is predicted to be. Now, when I say predicted to be, the terminal area forecasts that we're using here are showing the color code. Is it VFR, marginal VFR, IFR, low IFR, what is it? At the time we are going to be traversing past that airport. Okay, so this is not the current or active terminal area forecast. This is what it's going to be or what it's predicted to be based on our departure time and the performance and speed of our aircraft across the ground.
Just that one slice, that one time
that
slice.
one time slice through it. Yep. And we can see, you know, again, I wish it looks like this. I hope it looks like this on Sunday. We're going to have a beautiful trip the whole way down there. It looks like we're going to have VFR conditions the whole way down if we were leaving tonight. But you can see as you hover over each one of these, it jumps to that section, makes it very simple just to point to see what it is instead of having to scroll through a list and try to figure out, well, where is KGNV in proximity? I don't even know what that is. Now I know that's Gainesville, but where would that be, you know? NOTAMs, we'll look at this section and then we'll move on. NOTAMs tend to have a lot of information, and this is one of the sections in a normal text-based briefing that is usually the largest, and it takes a lot of time to get through. And conversely, it usually gets skipped by a lot of people because there's so much information, it's so overwhelming, it's not really logical that you're going to be able to read all that, let alone consume it. So we're taking the same approach by putting graphics or putting icons on the chart with little numbers by them. And if we go down to like the en route, we can see there's 308 en route NOTAMs, and we cluster them instead of just polluting the map with 100 different icons. We do cluster them, and we'll tell you how many are located in a certain area. The one that always has a lot are the runway, taxiway, and apron. Now this is en route, so this is not going to include our departure or destination. It'll include things along that. But if I go down and look in the Lakeland area towards our destination, you can see that there are 6 runway or taxiway NOTAMs in that area. And just by clicking on it, the list over on the right centers or adjusts itself to show me those. Or I can just click on it to then zoom the chart in and see where those NOTAMs are at in proximity to my route and at what airport they are. So we can see here that Zephyr Hills, there are 5. And again, all that I have to do is point to it, and it's going to show me those 5 NOTAMs for Zephyr Hills. Okay, so we've tried to make it very smart. So just by pointing your mouse to it, it's going to show you what you're expecting to see rather than trying to read it. Okay, so it should be very natural and very just point to what you want, and we'll show it to you.
And with NOTAMs in particular, of course, if you haven't played around with a lot of the online briefing and filing tools before, you may be shocked if you do it for the first time if you use a system unlike this one, where it gives you a flat text briefing all in one shot. You know, I'm used to seeing half of my briefing be comprised of those FDC NOTAMs at the end, many of which I've already seen 1,000 times, read top to bottom 10 times. You know, you can glance at them and know if they're applicable or not, for example. But you actually had some results that you related to me the other day.
Yeah, I wrote a story in the benefits bulletin a couple weeks ago, and part of that story is I took this actual route and I exported it to a Word document. So I pulled a text-based briefing and I exported this exact briefing we're looking at here to a Word document and brought it in 11-point font. It created 120 pages of text without any spaces, and the word count at the bottom was just shy of 47,000 words in that briefing. And then one of our developers, Sergey, he pointed out, which was interesting, I happened to be telling him about that, and he goes, you know, I think there's a minimum number of words for a fictional piece of work to be considered a novel, and that number is 40,000. So for a piece of fiction to be considered a novel, it has to be a minimum of 40,000 words, and this briefing was 47,000 words. So it just gives you an idea of how much information is in here. So anything we can do from a graphical stand to make that a little bit easier is certainly going to make that a little bit easier to digest. So that's the graphical briefing. That's what we're working on, and it's going to be coming out very soon. You'll be able to get a first-hand touch on this at Sun and Fun. Stop by the tent. And we're actually on Tuesday at noon, we'll be doing a very similar seminar at Sun and Fun in the AOPA. I call it the Activities Tent. I forget what we actually call that now. But we'll be doing that. We'll be talking a little bit more in detail, showing a couple other things that we don't have time to show here tonight. So if you are going to be at Sun and Fun, 12 o'clock on Tuesday, as the first day of the show, stop by the AOPA tent, and we'll be showing this actually feature and doing a live seminar basically there.
And let me make my first pitch for questions to everyone out there viewing. We will have time. If there are enough questions submitted, we'll be able to answer your questions. So start sending us your questions in the live chat over here on the right side in your YouTube view. I'm watching the chat. We've got some of our other members of the Flight Planner team watching the chat. We want your questions. We want to answer your questions and leave you happy and satisfied that we've covered everything you might want to know about the tool.
Yep. All right, so let's move on to the route line fuel warnings. This is going to set us up to look at the intermediate stop feature. Okay, so route line fuel warnings was a feature we introduced almost a year ago now, I believe. And again, it's the only tool out there that I think that I'm aware of that has this particular feature. And this is what set up everybody to say, well, geez, this is a great feature. Well, now why can't I need to be able to add a stop. So when we originally wanted to build this tool where you could add and set a fuel stop in your route, but as we dug into that, we found out very quickly that the intermediate stop feature of that was the hardest part to do. So we figured rather than wait and hold all of this, for a year until we could develop it, is let's go ahead and release the route line fuel warnings, because by itself it's extremely helpful. And then we'll add the intermediate stop feature later. So that's where we're at. So this is a good segue, again, for those people who may not know how this works. Basically, route line fuel warnings does color coding of the route line based on your fuel usage and your fuel reserves. Those color coding are based on your cruise, climb, and descent fuel burns, and they also consider winds aloft along your route. So we use the nav log, we know where your aircraft is going to be, and we can very highly predict where the fuel, where you're going to be. So we color code the line two different ways. Yellow zone is between 90 and 60 minutes of remaining fuel. The red zone on the line is less than 60 minutes of fuel. Okay, so let's jump over now and take a look at what that looks like. And we're going to use the same route that we did from Frederick to Lakeland. And right now we're seeing it as just a normal route with just the magenta line, like you would see in any EFB app or any other flight planning product that you might use.
We're all trained to follow the magenta line.
Follow the magenta line, right? So over in the left side, you'll see we have show fuel warnings, this little checkbox. Now this is on by default. You normally don't have to even interact with this, but we had it turned off tonight just for demonstration purposes. But as soon as I turn that on, you'll see that the route line now has some color added to it. And if I zoom in on the bottom of this route a little closer, you can see that the yellow area where it changes from magenta to yellow and then from yellow to red, this starts at 90 minutes of fuel remaining here, and at this part you're going to have 60 minutes of fuel remaining. After that, the entire red section of this route line, you will have less than 60 minutes of fuel. So the recommendation, and why 60 minutes, we get that question a lot, is why can't I adjust that? We want this to be safe. We follow the Air Safety Institute, the AOPA's Air Safety Institute recommendation for 60 minutes of fuel. Now, I know that doesn't always work for every aircraft out there. We know helicopters can fly with less than that. There's some planes, Cubs and things like that they would only get about 50 feet away from the airport before they had 60 minutes of fuel remaining. So it doesn't work for all aircraft, but that is where we sort of set it. It should work for most aircraft. So that's what the route line fuel warnings are. And you can turn those on and off as needed, but they are on by default.
And if you're using the Flight Planner and you do get these yellow and red segments, Eric, can you show how you can hover over the icons to get the little descriptive help text?
So for each segment, there's just a little badge here you can point your mouse at, and it's going to tell you, hey, there's insufficient fuel to complete this based on ASI recommendations. The yellow section will actually tell you that based on your aircraft, you have 60 minutes or 9 gallons of fuel remaining at this point. And that's based on your performance of your aircraft and what you have entered in the profile. So for this tool to be accurate, it's only going to be as accurate as what you have entered into the aircraft profile when you set it up. If you have not taken your time and made sure that your aircraft burned, your cruise, climb, and descent fuel burns and rates, if you have not taken the time to make sure those are accurate, then that is going to directly affect the accuracy of this line. So you definitely want to double check those. They're used not only in the navigation log, they are used in this tool as well.
Okay,
so.
Great.
This segues us into, the natural thing now is, okay, we know we should be stopping somewhere in this yellow area of the line. So, okay, how do we figure out? How do we know where we want to stop? So we can actually turn on another tool, which is the airports and fuel along route. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the filters part of this. But for right now, we're going to turn it on. Let me reset this just to get all these out. So we're going to turn it on right now just for the purposes of seeing fuel prices, because this may be one thing that we want to consider. So I'm going to zoom in pretty tight on this yellow section because that's where we're going to be looking for fuel. We know we want to stop somewhere in that area. Let me scroll up here a little bit and we'll zoom in just a little bit tighter here so everyone can see that. I know we got a lot of people looking on mobile devices, so I want to be sensitive to that.
And that shaded region around my route line is
that's the corridor.
Right.
So that right now is set to, what do I have that set to? 20 nautical miles. So you actually can adjust that. And the bigger I make it, the more fuel prices are going to be included. So it's essentially your tolerance or your willingness. How far off of your route do you want to fly for fuel? Okay, so rather than just covering the entire chart with fuel prices, we want to put them into some sort of corridor so we can determine, well, I'm not going to fly 50 miles off of my route to save 10 cents a gallon. It certainly doesn't make sense.
You already organically gravitated towards one of my 2 preferred fuel stops for that flight path, Allendale, South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the tool already guided you in the right direction, in my opinion.
It's going to show you. So we know the yellow section, and we can look at different fuel prices along here. Now, just out of convenience, there's one here that I always use for $3.99 a gallon. There's one down here is $3.80. It's even closer. But we'll show you a little bit later how sometimes it's not only just fuel price that dictates where you might want to stop. I know myself, I'd love to have a restaurant in the field. I'd love to have a crew car or a courtesy car available to me. I'd love to have at least an RNAV approach. I'll be a happy camper. But we have filters, and we'll look at that a little bit later of how we can actually filter these out too. So let's look at how easy it is. And again, I need to switch over to our Alpha, and we're going to rebuild this route real quick because that version I was using didn't have that in. So we'll just go ahead and plan the same exact flight, and we will turn on the fuel warnings. Now this is the one, again, this particular feature does not have that new feature in it yet. So this is an alpha build. Let's turn on our fuel, and we'll zoom back in on this yellow section. Okay. All right. So actually, I think this is just slightly different. We'll zoom in a little bit tighter here, just a little bit. Okay. So we're going to add KBNL. We're going to make that our fuel stop. Okay, so it's well within the yellow section of our route. Okay, so we know we'll have plenty of fuel left.
That's Barnwell. That's my other fuel stop.
Okay, you must fly this route a lot.
Oh, maybe 10 times.
Yep. So we're going to go ahead and add this. So in the past, you would have to create, basically terminate the flight there, and then create a new one from there. We're going to split this. So all that I have to do is I'm saying I'm stopping here, I right click on the chart, and you're going to see you have a new option now that says set as intermediate stop. I choose that option. Now this takes a second, and again, this is running on our development server, so they're not as beefy as our production servers, so it just takes a second for that to actually happen.
Which is another reminder, we're currently looking at a feature.
An unreleased feature.
It's not out there yet.
It's not out there yet. If you're just joining us, this is a pre-release, this is a sneak peek.
We urge you and encourage you to get excited about it, but hold your horses.
It's coming. It's coming. So now we can see what has happened. It's added KBNL, to our route, and it's started the color coding over again. You can see how now instead of being red, our next leg 2, is now magenta again, because we're assuming that we're going to add fuel at this stop.
But how much fuel did we add, Eric?
We'll find out. So we start these always out, we default them to the full fuel of the aircraft, but you can adjust those very easily. And I want to show you here on the left nav bar, you can see now we have leg 1, which is Frederick to BNL. If we scroll down, we now have leg 2, BNL to Lakeland. So we've split the route, and we allow you to edit the parameters for each one of these. So you see we have a fuel slider for each leg. I could adjust my departure fuel. If I go to leg 2, let's zoom out and actually look at the entire route. We may not need as much fuel to get down there. You can see we're not even turning yellow at the bottom here. If I wanted to, I could say, well, let's save some time, but we're just going to back off from the fuel. We're only going to put 40 gallons in. No sense tankering fuel around we're not going to use, not necessarily. So you can see that as I adjust that moves each leg independently. And again, at first glance, that looks very simple to do. It is a very complex feature to do. So we're maybe a third of the way only into the development. There's a lot of little bits yet we have to do. We're also, what you're not seeing on here that you're going to be able to do is you're also going to be able to enter the amount of time you're on the ground. So if you're saying, oh, well, I'm going to stop there and we're going to get fuel, and there also happens to be a restaurant there, we'll be able to have a field where you'll be able to put in 60 minutes. I'm going to be on the ground for 60 minutes. Then leg 2, when it calculates that departure or that nav log, it will use that new departure time. So it'll add 60 minutes to whatever your arrival time was, and that will be your new departure time. So if you file it or you brief it, all the times are going to line up. And you can see, as we're talking about, that each one of the legs has its own nav log, its own briefing, its own filing, and its own email. So if I go up and look at leg 1, you'll see those same buttons for leg 1. So you can treat each one of these as a completely separate flight plan, yet they're all part of the overall large flight plan.
Now, I hate to do this. We didn't brief for this question, but someone's asking. I'm going to put you to the test. How modular is this? Can you insert more than one fuel stop?
Absolutely.
So you can have multiple legs.
Sure.
Not just 2.
Yeah, we've tested it out to, I think, 4 or 5. There's really probably not I'm sure there's some thing slow. There's background here. At some point, it's going to get slow. It's going to get progressively slower because it has to, every time you change, if you changed a leg in the middle, if you had 5 and you changed leg 3, you've also changed all the other ones.
Right.
So there's a ton of math, there's a ton of things actually happening there. So, but we've tested it out to 4 or 5, and it's working. And I can't imagine anybody stopping more than 5 times in a single day anyway.
That's not just pushing the limits of the human bladder, that's pushing the total limits of human endurance.
Absolutely.
For any given day.
Yep. So yes, you will be having more than just one. Every time you do that, you can add another leg.
Wonderful.
So that's it. Again, that is the #1 user requested feature. We get this request a couple times a week at least, but that's why we wanted to show this to you. We don't normally, you're actually looking at an alpha build. This is not even a beta version yet. This is still alpha software. So it's not anywhere ready for release. But we wanted to show people this just to say, yes, we hear you. We are responsive to what you're asking us to build. We're building this for all of us. I use the products. So we want to deliver features that our members are asking for. And again, you're not going to find this feature. I have not found one other flight planning tool that actually does this. So everything we're doing, we're sort of having to reinvent the wheel a little bit because we don't have a wheel to start with to look at how did somebody else do this. So we're actually cutting some new territory here.
And as far as users submitting feedback, we're going to cover that a little later. We do have a really really excellent, really robust way that members can get the feedback to us on not just bugs, but more importantly, feature requests, upvote them, and we'll talk through that. But the point there is what you're echoing here right now, which is we're listening, we're doing. You know, I've been here over 6 years now, and ever since I started answering the phones in the Pilot Information Center, helping with some of those digital product support tech calls, people have been asking for the multiple leg feature.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Constantly.
And it's natural. If you think about it, it's a very natural fit. So, you know, we're happy to be able to do it and bring it out. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of the other features that are in the tool that you can actually work with. This might be repeat for some people, but we'll talk about these as a review, and for anybody new to the tools, you can actually see this. And this is what I call the along route tools. We sort of started this with one tool, and then it really made its way into a lot of other tools. Is again, we've kind of focused on the route itself. This is a flight planning tool, so we want to look at the route, and we try to keep things that work within the route corridor. So you're going to see this route corridor concept a lot. So there's 3 different, or almost 4 different route tools. Weather along route, this is a predictive view of the TAF data based on when your aircraft is going to be passing that reporting station. The fuel along route, we sort of looked at that. This is the color-coded fuel prices along your route, so we did look at that a little bit ago. And the airports along route, which gives us filtering capability on airports to filter out airports that maybe don't have some of the amenities we're looking for. So let's jump back in, and we're going to again look at this same flight. And the first one we're going to look at, and we're going to look at the full route here, is weather along route. So weather along route allows me to set a departure time and then pull the weather based on the terminal area forecast that is predicted to be in each one of those areas as my aircraft is going to be there. So this is based on the nav log, this is based on the performance of my aircraft and basically my ground speed. This includes climb, this includes descent, and it includes winds aloft. Okay, all those acts on your plane as far as where it's going to be. So we can see that a lot of these, this is all green, so they're all VFR. What's different though is we are actually looking at a timeline. So if I just point my mouse and I look at this, now some of these don't really show well because they're all VFR, but every dot that you're seeing on here has a time associated with it. And you're looking at a linear projection of all the TAF reports for that particular station. And this happens to be Florence, South Carolina. So at 8:40, there was a TAF issued for VFR. At 12 a.m., there was a TAF issued for VFR, and so on. Okay. So rather than looking at it in a list, you can look at it in a timeline or a time scale. And you also see there's a hazard layer down there, and that's the second little timeline. So in the little white vertical triangle with the dashed line, that represents my crossing time. So we can see that if we left, this was a 9 p.m. departure. If I left at 9 p.m., I would be passing by Florence, South Carolina at 11:51 p.m. Okay, it's forecast to be VFR, and that's where the hazards come in. And to see what those hazards are, I click on it, and now I get a larger, more detailed view of the weather timeline.
So just to clarify, your green line, your conditions line, that's merely looking at ceilings and visibility.
Ceilings and visibility only.
Right. So everything else will be encapsulated in that hazards line. For example,
that's right.
You know, blowing sand, smoke, hail,
ice,
you know, frogs.
Freezing. Yep.
Right. Everything else falling from the sky that might be
Right.
pretty negative and deleterious to my ability
That's
to see. Okay.
And this is another unique feature of this tool that you're not going to find in other tools. Other tools certainly can display color-coded icons for TAFs, but what they're not going to basically show you in that color icon is if there's any hazards or any things that you really ought to know about. You think about the summertime, it's almost all the time where you're going to have, yep, absolutely, you're going to have showers in the vicinity or even thunderstorms in the vicinity or even in the terminal area, yet it's still VFR. We still have enough ceiling and enough visibility to be VFR, but there's thunderstorms. And if you just look at a green icon and say, okay, well, it's green, it's VFR, let's go. And I wrote another article that it was titled "Green doesn't always mean go." So you really have to look at that. So we came up with this hazards layer or hazards timeline to point that out and make it a little bit more obvious. And let's actually see one here. I'm going to adjust the departure time. If we didn't like what we were seeing here, I can actually use this slider to adjust the departure time. And we can see what happens to the weather if I delay my departure. And you can see how it got really bad here. We saw some IFR and marginal VFR conditions in the part of the flight if I left at 6 a.m. Okay, if I continue to slide that along, we're now at 10:30 a.m. It's getting a little bit better, and I get somewhere around 1:30 p.m. the following day, and it doesn't look bad except for we have one area here that is going to be IFR. But I wanted to try to find one here that had a warning, but it doesn't look like the weather is going to cooperate. You can never find bad weather when you want it. So. But anyway, this one is in marginal VFR conditions, so we can see that we are going to be passing. Here's our vertical indicator that tells us we're going to be passing through there at 10:25 in the morning based on a 9:30 a.m. departure. They're calling marginal VFR, ceiling 2,500 and 4 miles, and mist is our hazard. Okay, so those, and we color code those. Even down in the actual details, it'll tell you that it's 4 miles and mist. Okay, and it uses the same color coding. So that's our weather along route, a very, very helpful tool. Allows you to kind of pick that sweet spot of departure time based on the TAFs. I've used this to great success multiple times and have actually changed my departure time based on what this told us and ended up having a great flight. So it's a very, very handy tool.
People are raving about it online.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It is a unique tool.
Flying Zenith must have some toys. Flying Zenith CX750 riding YZ250FX. I think that last one's a Honda dirt bike. The weather along route is absolutely awesome. There you go.
It's a great tool. We really like it. We get a lot of great feedback from members all the time on it, especially at the show. We actually had people at Oshkosh, they were bringing their friends in and doing the demo themselves, which is awesome. They were saying, move out of the way, I got to show my buddy this. And they ended up doing a demo on our kiosk. They're showing their friends this tool.
Don't you hate it when out of love for the product, they're doing the work for us?
Absolutely.
Oh, man.
It's, we're connected here, it's working out.
Exactly.
So let's wind it up here. I'm not sure time-wise we're getting there, but I want to have enough time for questions and answers. And we already looked at the fuel along route, so we're going to go ahead and pop that one open here real quickly. And we're going to look at the filters real quick. So here's basically that same thing we saw, and we'll set it, let's set it a little wider here, maybe 35 miles. There's a corridor, there's all the fuel prices in that area. If you expand this and look at the filters, we allow you to filter out certain things. So if you knew you wanted to stop in a certain area, but geez, I don't want to have to pay a landing fee, and I'd love to have at least an RNAV approach. I want an FBO, and it'd be great if they had a courtesy car. Now, based on all those parameters, the more you select, the more filtering you're actually going to do. So you may have to give up on some of these to actually find where that airport where you want to go. You can even set a minimum runway length. If you knew you wanted 3,000 feet for a runway length, you could put that in there, and it'll filter out airports that don't have at least a 3,000 foot runway. Restaurants on field, this is the big one that usually knocks a lot of them out, or restaurants that are nearby. Now I've got a lot of things checked here, so we're asking a lot to try to find the perfect airport. But this does allow you to use this in a different way and help find that airport you may want to stop at rather than just going only on fuel prices. So those are the along route tools, and the last one we're going to look at is the EFB integrations.
Great. We've been having some questions asked on that. People asking, how can I, someone said, seamlessly get my flight plan into my EFB app?
And it depends on which one you have. There's a couple different ways. The most common way is using our nav log. You just simply send yourself an email, and that email will have a great nav log to use as a backup. And then you just tap one button, and it'll open. And we'll actually show you that in a sort of simulated iPad here. We'll show you how that works. So you can send this nav log that has these magic buttons. You can send that to any email address. You could send it to yourself, and you could also send it to a flying buddy. I know people that fly in 2-ship and 3-ship, sort of groups or formations. One guy will plan the flight, and he'll send this nav log that has this button to his 3 friends. And the nice thing about this is this nav log has these buttons that allow you to open the route in our supported EFB apps. And one person could be using ForeFlight, another person could be using FlyQ, and a third person could be using WingX. And they could all get the same email and actually open the route in 3 totally separate EFBs. So currently, we support 6 different EFB apps. We cover both iOS and Android for the ones that do offer that. Flightplan.com Go has been the most recent one. That was a very popular one we got from a lot of people wanted us to add support for Flight Plan Go. So that is in there now. It's supported. ForeFlight Mobile, of course. Garmin Pilot is now supported. Navigator, which is an Android-only EFB, very popular in the Android community. Seattle Avionics, their version of FlyQ EFB, and WingX Pro 7. So all of those are supported by using these buttons in the nav log. Navigator and WingX Pro have done what we call direct integrations, and some of these other ones are also, they're planning on doing that as well. That takes a little bit more effort on their part, so it's easier for us to do this little button in the nav log. But Navigator and WingX Pro both allow you to download your AOPA saved flight plans directly within their apps. So you actually put in your AOPA web credentials, the same username and password you log into our website, is you put that into their app, into their flight plans or import section, and you'll actually see a list of all your things. And we'll actually show those, what that actually looks like here. Actually, I'm going to stay in it here because this is where we're going to actually show this. So I don't have to switch and hook up an iPad, I took a few screenshots and kind of animated them to show you what this process looks like. Once you have your flight planned, you'll see an email button down in the lower, the bottom of this, our sidebar, our left sidebar. Click email, you put in your email address or anybody you want to send this to, and click the send email button, and you'll get a confirmation that it was successfully sent, and then you can close that. We're done with that. We're done with the flight planner now. On your iPad or on your Android tablet, whatever it happens to be, you're going to see an email come in from the AOPA Flight Planner that has the nav log in it. Okay, this is a traditional, very popular format we've had for many years. This actually does not have the button up here for Flight Plan Go. This was an older screenshot, but there are now 5 buttons. There are these 5 buttons that'll be up here: ForeFlight, Garmin, Seattle, WingX, and then you'll also see the Flight Plan Go. You tap the button, and in this case we're going to use ForeFlight. So I tap the ForeFlight mobile button. It will launch ForeFlight on your iPad, and that route will be imported exactly the way you had it. Okay, in the flight planner. Okay, so there it is. Once it's in ForeFlight or whatever EFB, it works just like any app or any flight route that you would create in it natively. And you can even save it. You could brief it. You could file it through here. It just saves you the time of rebuilding it in the device. Let's take a look at WingX here, and this is an example of the direct integration. So in theirs, you click on the route over in their left side. That's going to give you the sort of import route window. You click on the AOPA button at the top, and in the AOPA username and password field, put in your same login that you log into our website with, and then hit the Get Route list from AOPA. It'll contact our server. You do need an internet connection to do this. It contacts our server, and then you'll see a list of all of the routes that you have saved in the flight planner, in the AOPA Flight Planner. You click on the one we were doing with Frederick to RCR. We click on that one, and it will rebuild that route for you in WingX in this case. So Navigator works very similar on the Android devices. Same type of thing. You put in your credentials, and it opens it up. So again, 6 different EFB supported, and I'm aware of at least one more that is working on it. Another popular one we get requested all the time. We've talked with them and given them everything they need to do it on their part, and they're working on it. I don't want to announce who that is yet. I want to give them the opportunity to announce that first. So, but I know they are working on something. So, to wind us up before we get into the actual questions part of it, I'm sure we have a number of those, is you alluded to this a little bit earlier, is we have this tool to allow members to actually ask us for features and even vote for other features that other members have asked. And that tool is called User Echo. You can get to it at the address you're seeing there, aopa.org/flightplanning/feedback, or you can get to it directly from within the AOPA Flight Planner. If you click on the support and feedback button at the top menu bar, you'll see options there is to submit feedback. We should also mention there's a bunch of YouTube tutorial videos in there. There's the full user guide, and then there's also the ability to send us a support ticket.
The videos are fantastic. You did a great job on them, absolutely.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun to do. We get a lot of good feedback, and those tutorial videos are more tutorial in nature. We literally start with the very simple stuff and go to the advanced stuff. Anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes long, just depends on what we're covering in those videos, and we try to do that every time we release a new feature. We usually have a video ready to go for that as well.
Excellent.
Okay. We have some questions?
All right, we do have a few. I've fed a few in as we went. Lots of people are asking about, and I don't want the long version because I don't want to hold you to details that may or may not happen, but people are asking a lot about the release dates. Can you remind us when we might expect to see some of these things?
Sure. We are targeting for the graphical briefing with Leidos. We are targeting the middle of April with that. And again, I am going to say that with a big asterisk next to it. Part of that process requires Leidos to test our integration with their system. We are sticking flight plans into the National Air Traffic Control System, so they want to make sure that what we're sending them is not going to break something. So they have to go through a review process. We have already sent the tool to them. They have access to it. They are testing it. So they are doing that right now, and we are communicating with them, working with them on a date. They ask us when we are trying to be ready, so they know how that affects their testing schedule. And we're both agreeing that we're going to target this for middle of April, maybe a little sooner, maybe. But that's barring that we don't have to change anything either. Mm-hmm. So if they come back and say, oh, well, we found that if you create a user waypoint, a custom waypoint, that this failed or something happened.
Custom waypoints are always kind of tough.
Custom waypoints can be tricky with the formats and things like that. So we may have to go back and change a couple things. We don't know. We haven't received any feedback, which, knock on wood, let's say is good for right now. But we may have to change a couple things, and that could push that out. For the intermediate stop, boy, I wish we could narrow that one down, but we are really just in maybe a third of the way into that. And again, that is one of those features that sounds like, and it looks like from what I showed, this is simple.
Looks pretty good.
Once you get into all the nuances of it and all the little things that it touches and how it has to work and how it has to work with a KO and all these little bits, it is a much bigger piece.
You mentioned ICAO. I don't think we've covered tonight. ICAO doesn't let you file multi-segments, right?
Right, and that's one of the things we had to consider. We know we're going to be switching to a KO, to that flight plan format here shortly. That's going to happen, certainly this year. In the old, using the FAA domestic, there apparently was, I've never done it myself, but there apparently was the ability to create a single flight plan that included a stop in that. A KO does not permit that. For a KO, if you are going to stop, that has to be one flight plan, and then you have to file another flight plan from that point on. So we had to build the tool with that in mind. So sometimes we have to look forward to figure out what we have to build, especially when we get into complex features like this.
Right.
And it's one of those things, as we got into this feature, I know now why nobody else has tried to do this. We thought it was simple, and we started, peeling back the onion. And sometimes you peel back the onion, and all you're left with is tears. But we're getting there. It's coming along. We can sort of see the light. I'm gonna cautionally say summer this year. But again, put a big asterisk next to that. We're going to shoot for it, and hopefully we can do it if everything keeps going. But
again, not to hold you to anything. Sometimes things happen, but people are excited. People want to know.
Well, we always have the known unknowns, right? We've heard that how many years ago we're familiar with that term. We may discover things, and more than likely, as we get deeper into this, we discover something that we had not thought about or hadn't considered, and we just have to plan around that and work through it. But it's software; nothing we can't do.
Sure. Next up, we had a few people ask as far as being able to either plan or at least give them a sense of well-being for the flight plan they're building, to be able to see some sort of terrain clearance indications. And maybe can you show us the profile view really quickly?
Sure can, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and we're actually, one of the features we have on this tool is we do want to actually do a little bit more with terrain awareness, and that's one of the things that after we get this intermediate stop done, one of the next features we're probably going to be working on is more of a 2D view to kind of show you terrain. But right now, and actually I'm going to bring this down to 4,000 feet just so we might be able to see some terrain here. If you go to the route menu and go to profile, the profile view will show you not only terrain, it will also show you airspace. Try to bring this up a little bit here. So you can see the different shaded areas show you the different airspaces. So you can see their color. The magenta ones are going to be Class C airspace. You can see some Class B and also some Class D airspace through there. And then you can see the blue line represents our our actual route, and we set it at 4,000 feet. And if you look here, here's some of these mountains near our departure point, and we're going to be right skimming across them. That's why the MEA needed to be up somewhere 6,000 or 8,000 to get across these. But this gives you a profile view to be able to look at the terrain and see where, how high you need to be. So we want to make this a little bit more interactive, and we want to do more of a 2D top-down view on this too in a future release. So hopefully we can get something like that a little bit later this year too.
I guess that's somewhere down Ingalls Hot Springs Way in Virginia.
Yeah, that's definitely in
west of 81.
Yep,
Yeah.
Blue Mountains there and all that, Appalachians.
So you mentioned altitude there. We were looking at in the profile view. One of the other things that people are asking for is I want to be able to plan for multiple altitude segments.
Well, first off, with the multi-leg, with the intermediate stop, each one of those legs can have a separate altitude. So that should go without saying, because they really are two separate flight plans. We actually, we are partnered with Jeppesen on this, and we are constrained by some of the back-end functionality of their server. We just found out a couple weeks ago, literally, that we do now have the ability to do individual altitudes per waypoint. Okay, so we do now have support for that in the back end, and we are going to be able to bring that feature into the flight planner here a little bit later this year. But this is kind of the cascade effect, the domino effect that I always talk about, is now we have to weave that feature into this intermediate stop feature and all these, and they all touch each other at some point, so it just ups the level. So we want to get through the intermediate stop feature first, get that out, get that deployed, and then we're going to come back around and we're going to look at the ability to add a altitude per waypoint. So that is something we should have the ability to do now.
This is a really good question. I don't actually even know the answer on how to apply it in the flight planner. Hopefully we can. How do I know if an airport has a right-hand pattern runway? Would that be in the info box?
Yeah, it would be in the info box. And remember, the AOPA airports, or the AOPA Flight Planner, is integrated with AOPA airports. Okay, so that is our online airport directory. So if you right-click on a particular airport and you pull up the information on that, we have some basic information. You can also then click on that to get all the information where that will show that. That being said, we are working on enhancements to that tool as well. There's a separate team internally that are enhancing the airports directory, and we're going to be able to bring more of that type of information into the flight planner. So we're going to have additional capability around those type of pieces.
Excellent. All right, Eric, looks like we've run the substantial portion of the questions through.
Okay.
So we
Excellent.
hit the next gen briefing piece. We hit the all of the new along route pieces. We talked about the EFB app integrations, which are great, and as you said, there may be more coming shortly down the road. Anything else you want to bring in?
No, just come visit with us at Sun and Fun.
Absolutely.
Also, shameless plug, the subscribe button down at the bottom of the your viewer window there in YouTube. If you click the subscribe button, you'll subscribe to the AOPA main YouTube channel we have. That is the easiest way to get notified whenever we bring new YouTube videos like this to you. So we're going to be doing a lot more on YouTube. This is our new platform for doing webinars and other types of live events. So you're going to see this be more of a routine thing. So click the subscribe button. That way, when we're live, even if it's something that you didn't know we were doing, you'll get notified of it, and you'll be able to see that on your device, your mobile device, your phone, whatever. But subscribe there, and that's the easiest way to know what we're doing. Keep in touch with AOPA.
And Kathy, how many do we have scheduled for this year so far? About a dozen total, I think?
About a dozen.
Yeah, but we have a dozen already scheduled on our online learning area under AOPA webinars, two of which have already, or three? No, I can't remember if your first one was this year.
That was actually in December, the
Okay,
first
yeah.
one we did on the flight planner.
Right.
Yeah, that was sort of our proof of concept to test the waters a little bit. And like I said, this is a new sort of methodology for us. And the feedback we're getting on the YouTube, this new format is outstanding. If anybody has attended any of our old webinars in the past, we were using sort of a legacy product, a webcast product. And we couldn't do certain things like this. We couldn't do screen sharing, and we couldn't really do some of the other things that we're going to get into down the road with YouTube. So we have a lot more technology available to us now in this platform.
Yep, it's wonderful. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'd like to thank Warren, Vance, John Paul, Kathy, as well as Eric for all their hard work in putting this together this evening. We've had a great time. Hope you've enjoyed it as well. And I would like to encourage you to contact us here at AOPA. If you do have any further questions, you can give us a call at 1-800-USA-AOPA, or you can email us at pilotassist@aopa.org. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
That's a good show. Great job.